Hi everyone, my name is Imran, and I am here to do a nice little workshop I thought I'd do given that it's UADC prep season. Preparing for majors as a judge. UADC and ABP are kinda terrifying. How do you survive? I feel that I am somewhat I have gone and broken three majors, so I thought that I'd help share a little bit of my own experiences, how I survived, the strategies I used to survive and prep for majors, and then hopefully this helps you quite a lot. So five parts to this workshop. First, some very important caveats. Secondly, the I think the most very important uh, reminder that majors are very difficult and you have to remember some things. Thirdly, the preparation season. Fourthly, the major itself. And finally, some other miscellaneous stuff. This will be posted on YouTube. If you want to ask me anything about the workshop, anything about judging, please post it in the comments below. Cool. Some very important caveats. I'm gonna try. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm just gonna remove the floating meetings rule. There we go. And put this on the side. Yeah, so some very important caveats. The first and most important caveat here is as much as I love yapping and teaching people about about what I can teach, I'm not a pro at this. So don't treat this workshop as scripture. The current Guangzhou UADC CAP team have already prepared a very amazing workshop series that you should watch as well. Other majors, such as Korea Worlds, literally every major, actually, every single edition of UADC, Australs, Worlds, ABP have prepared a workshop series or just some form of initiative. And chances of are all of them have something related to judging. And they are given by judges who are far better than me, who have probably much more wisdom than me. Actually, definitely have more wisdom than me. So I suggest you go to those sources and just kind of, I guess you could say, diversify these sources if you're looking to kind of improve your judging. Secondly, these are strategies I have done and advice I would give, which worked for me, but it may or may not work for you. So it's important to figure yourself out as a judge, as a person, figure out what works as you. Finally, this is not a one-shot guaranteed workshop to make you break at a major. As I'll explain later, breaking at a major is incredibly difficult, and we have to be realistic. The odds of breaking at a major are something you can try and change a little bit, but it is something you cannot ultimately control. Every single person is not guaranteed a major break. You can obviously minimize the risk, you can be a bit more reppy and just be good at it, but I'm sure that the vast majority of people who go judging at majors, it is a life or death thing for them. They are not guaranteed a break. In fact, I would say every single one of my major runs, I was not guaranteed a break. As much as my friends like to tell me, Imran, you're just a really good judge. Of course you break at a major. And like, yeah, thanks for making me feel better. But yeah, I know that's kind of not true. Obviously, every single major, you are not guaranteed a break. So this is very important. Yeah. Second part, majors are really difficult. So this elaborates on the last part of the first thing I say. Majors are very, very difficult. They're one of the most difficult things you can ever kind of go through in your career. First, because you generally cannot control the outcome of how teams perceive your OA, how teams perceive your judging. And the reason for that is very obvious. It matters a lot to them. They are also fighting for the break. So giving them a loss is like giving them a sucker punch to the nuts. And you can't control how good they feel. And so what ends up happening is every round is a gamble where you are genuinely praying to God that the debaters who we are judging like your OA or are believed and persuaded by your OA. Obviously, a huge part of this workshop is making sure you can control the variables in your favor, but you cannot control the variables to the point where every single round is going to be in your favor. Sometimes you will just have a team which really, really felt bad and just had a heavy negative bias, and there really isn't so much you can deal with those kinds of teams, and it just so happens that majors will have a lot of those teams. Secondly, the pressure is going to be real, and obviously because of the teams, the pressure is really high, so every single round is going to be insanely contentious. Every single round will probably not be as close, not be as easy to judge. Maybe you get lucky, maybe you get just get one round where it's very clear to easy and judge, but I guarantee you most of the rounds, even the low mid rooms, even the bin rooms, for example, are going to be rounds which you do have to be at your A game. Even if rounds are clear, it doesn't give you an excuse to make an OA, which is very convenient and easy. You always have to be at your A game because missing one thing could genuinely make the difference between a 4 and a 7. And I think I've gotten some of this when I've asked for feedback where teams are like, I think you evaluated this one subclass wrong, and I thought that kind of affected the OA a little bit. And I was like, crap, you're right. And these are things you really want to avoid preemptively. Finally, allocation anxiety. What is allocation anxiety? Basically, you see the allocation you're in, and you realize I'm not really judging a good room. How well am I doing? And this is something which is very, very prevalent in majors because there are more than 5 rounds. There's 8 rounds in UADC. There's 6 rounds in ABP. There are 7 rounds in 7 or 8 rounds. I forgot Australs. I've never judged Australs. The point is that majors have a lot of rounds, and your and the way that you get allocated specifically in the middle of the middle rounds, like round fours to round six, are something like which if you overthink it or if you realize you've been put in a room that is not ideal, i.e., you're not allocated to a bubble or you're not allocated to a quote unquote contentious room, given that the other problem with majors is that you cannot measure your progress because teams can look at the amount of points they have and understand how well they're doing. Judges have basically zero guaranteed information. Like, you're put in a bubble, I guess it's a good sign you're being cap tested. You're put in the middle room, you don't know. You're put in a bin room in round 8, you're probably screwed. But at the same time, maybe you aren't actually screwed. Maybe you're actually guaranteed for the break. These are a lot of the things which I've had to go through, the anxieties I've had to go through of like, God, what the actual heck is going on? How well am I doing? And across all these anxieties, especially later down in the major, it's very important for you to kind of be aware that you cannot understand if with the limited amount of information you really need to be able to learn how not to crumble, and hopefully this will really help. But yeah, the bottom line here is that competing in the major as a judge is very difficult. You don't know how well, you can't measure your progress during the major. You're going to feel a lot of pressure. Teams, even if they're trying not to be mean, will inevitably put a higher standard onto you, so you always have to perform it, or at least it always feels like you always have to perform things like that. Cool. Okay, so the majors prep season. I think this is probably the most important part. I guess although the most other important part is what you do in the major itself. So I'll be the most rigorous on this. I'll split this into 5 segments. First, sparring, prep tournaments, getting help, judging workshops, and then tracking your progress. First, on sparring. Very easy. Judge every spar you can to make sure that you are quote unquote never rusty. Spars are just good for developing yourself as a judge, specifically developing your strengths, what you are good as a judge. So, for example, when I was preparing for my first ever UADC, the thing that I found out about myself was that I just happened to be good at tracking because I was able to really hyperfixate and listen to every claim that was launched in the debate, and that led to my OAs being very rigorous. So I just developed them. Also, of course, working on your weakness. Something I found out about my OAs is that I tend to be all over the place. I'm not very clear or concise, so I tend to take a lot of time to sort of prove a point and then experiment with what works, what doesn't. This goes for experimenting a lot of things. Experimenting with your tracking style. Are you better at paper judging as opposed to laptop judging? If you are better at laptop judging, are you better at judging in Microsoft OneNote? Are you better at Word docs? Are you better even at Google Docs? Maybe you just happen to be better at spreadsheet judging, which by the way is a real thing that people do. There are so many different styles of judging, and I think it's important during the sparring prep season to figure out what works for you, because there's less of an expectation to perform in spars. Teams are just there to practice. They're not going to be pissed at you if you give them the loss, unless they're a mean team. But I guarantee you that most teams who are preparing for majors are not going to hold you upon a standard where you constantly have to perform. Sparring is prime time for you to really, really figure out what works for you. This leads me to the second part, which is to always get feedback from the teams that you judge. I think this is something that judges genuinely need to do more often. Always ask the teams that you judge in a spar, what did you think of my OA? This is something I did all the time, every single time I judged a round whenever I was preparing for a major. Even by the time it was my third ever major and I already broken at 2 majors, I always made it a point, hey, How did you think about OA? The reason you do this is because no matter how quote unquote good you get, no matter how good you feel your OA is, teams will always provide a unique perspective on what they thought about your OA. And this is important because you need to win the teams that you judge, especially the teams you give the loss to. And this applies even if the team is like a novice team or a team who isn't a good judge, because their perspective is going to ultimately make up the bulk of the basis of the feedback that you're going to get. So it's very important for you to understand how teams perceive your OAs so that you can kind of optimize and figure out. Thirdly, this is slightly unhealthy, but I think it's important, especially if you do want to break. I would recommend judging a lot of spars. Back when I was doing pre-UADC season and pre-ABP season 23, I judged spar every single day. Make sure you obviously balance the time to make sure you can make do a spar. The whole point of doing a lot of spars is to practice giving an OA and trying to improve on the previous OA. If you can't find a spar, the thing that I used to do that I didn't add in this slide, but I'll just say it here now, is judge recordings and just give an OA. Just make sure that you give an OA. Just try to get the practice in and figure out how to listen to your OA. Judging is just generally a skill that gets so much more better the more you do it. But obviously, I think that's something that everyone knows about judging. Secondly, on preparation comps, go to the pre-major comps, the pre-UADCs, because they're going to hire the caps of the major in question, and the participating teams of that prep comp will probably go to UADC or ABP or whatever comp. So, for example, upcoming Ilmam pre-UADC, maybe it's in person. You have NTUDC or UT Mara APDO 2025. Taylor's AP pre-UADC is this weekend. Obviously, this is just seasonal to what's going on in this right now, which is UADC 2025, but as you go on, you can check the global debating spreadsheet. They're going to be the pre-majors comps. Try to go every weekend if possible. Obviously, it's not mandatory to go every weekend, but hey, I used to go every single weekend. Literally for ABP, I attended at ABP, the moment that pre-ABP season started, I judged literally every single pre-ABP comp under the sun. And it was like it helped. It definitely helped me quite a lot. Secondly, treat every round as if you're judging the major itself. It's a prep comp. Sure, it's not the actual major, but given that it is going to compile the people who are going to the major, there's just a non-zero chance that your round one draw in X pre-UADC comp becomes the exact same matchup in round one of UADC. My point is that teams are going to take that round as if they were judging UADC. You should judge that round as if it was actually UADC. Thirdly, always get summarized feedback and scores from the cap, and I think this is very important. Sometimes caps are not responsive. I'm a victim of this. Sorry, I'm a suspect of this. I forget to respond to people asking for feedback. So double text them. I know it's kind of mean to say to maybe Vansh, if you're watching this, I'm very sorry if teams are annoying you or literally any all my friends who are prepping for majors. But obviously they would know in terms of the responsibility of a cap to try and give, because this is something that's very important. Because the summarized feedback you get every time after a tournament, obviously it's important to measure your progress and ensure how well you're doing. Let's say you can't get the feedback. Let's say the caps have ghosted you. Every time after a round has ended, like say round one, round two of that prep comp, literally ask the team you just judged for feedback. This is also what I did every time. I had this recurring theme where there were certain teams who I just happened to coincidentally judge a lot of the time. So I won't mention names here, but I just happened to coincidentally judge the same person most of the time in every comp. I guess one name I will drop is Shoria. For some reason, every time during the pre-ABP season, I would find a way to just get allocated in the round where I would judge Shoria's team, and we'd always just kind of I always have the opportunity to ask him for how's my OA. And if they are your friends, it's very easy. If you meet them a lot, then of course it'll be easy. They will be helpful to respond with their honest thoughts. And again, this applies to everyone, even the losing team. Even if you don't know the team, just ask them for feedback. Hopefully they respond, and if they do, they'll generally try to help you. If they didn't like your OA, maybe they'll say, I didn't think your OA was that great. I felt you didn't take this thing seriously, and that's going to be good criticism. Always ask them to be honest, because their honesty is what will help you. And most of the time, they won't be mean. They just generally will just say what is in their mind. C, getting help. Firstly, try to ask seniors or anyone you know who is a wise person or in judging. You can even ask me too. My comment sections are there. If you know my if you know where my social media pages are, you can message me there too. The wisdom of other go-to judges has been very incredibly helpful for me to figure out how they did it and how I could get their strategies and implement it for my own judging. Secondly, of course, going back, and I will repeat this point quite a lot, the teams that you judge will probably comprise of good judges too. That's why you ask them for feedback. Be very specific with questions, by the way. Always ask, what can I improve on, and how can I fix this specific weakness? And definitely, they will probably chip in some very good advice that'll help you. If possible, always try, and if you can, try get an external coach or just a very helpful senior to monitor the OAs that you give, so that you can always get some feedback on most of the OAs you give. Again, these steps aren't mandatory. If you cannot access seniors to help you out, the very least you can do is ask the team who are judging in a spar how well your feedback was. Again, going back into asking feedback. I will mention this point a lot because I think it's one of the most important benchmarks of getting better. D. Judging workshops. You're watching one right now, watch more of these things. Every single major has initiatives that give at least one workshop on judging, watch those. Take notes of them, reflect how you can use the skills taught in that judging. Thirdly, and this is probably the least important advice I give you, but I think it's helpful, match your load. You don't have to do this. This is really not that important, but I think it is important to bridge gaps because there are going to be some rounds where your knowledge in being a better average reasonable voter will help. Sometimes teams will say empirical claims, which are actually just bullcrap, and you need to be able to call that out and understand that what they're saying is wrong. I hope I will leave some recommendations I can find in the description later. E. Tracking your progress. Very important. I think this is probably the most important part of the prep major season. Number one, record every single OA and re-listen to them. I don't care if you hate listening to your own voice. That's the point. You hate your own voice and you hate how you sound. The best critic is yourself. And this can be very helpful if you can't find an external coach. Because let's say you ask me for help. I probably won't be there to mention every single OA. That's for example, your coach is not going to be there to help you with every single OA. So you need to be there and help yourself. Listen to every OA you give, whether it's a it was a OA for a prep comp, whether it's OA for a spar that was pretty contentious, because that's generally how you are able to critically think and figure out how you did. Secondly, create a judging diary. I personally always had a folder in my Google Drive where it would be UADC 2024 prep, and in that folder it would just be literally every single round I've ever judged, and then every single time I judged after judging, maybe it's a physical folder if you're a paper judge, just write some brief reflections on how you thought about your OA. Did you think it was a 10? Would you score it a 7? Would you score it a 3? Did you hate it? Why did you hate it? How could you have improved? What do you want to do next as a judge? I think it's more important. Obviously, part two is important. How can you improve? You need to critically think about the parts that you felt were missing and how you can improve on that next. Thirdly, on what you want to do next. So obviously, this is in the experimental phase. Maybe you're tracking your feedbacks and you figure out you could do X thing better and you want to work on X thing. Maybe you want to work a little bit more on a different kind of tracking style. Maybe you want to work on the structure of your OA, how you segment different clashes. These are many, many questions that you eventually do encounter. Finally, track your achievements. I think this is very good, firstly, because it just helps with IA applications. I'm sure everyone does this, but in case you don't, I suggest you do it now. But also, it's just a good benchmark. When I was before ABP, I noticed and realized that I was basically getting a judge award in every single prep ABP comp I was doing. Or if I wasn't getting a judge award, I was getting into finals, I was getting into semis, and that really made me feel good. In terms of the fact that it motivated me, it gave me hope to realize, holy crap, I have a chance to break ABP because look, I'm doing quite well in these prep comps. And even if you're doing well, let's just say you're just not breaking in some comps, maybe you're just breaking low. I would say that it's a good wake up call still because it helps you realize, why am I not doing good enough? I need to really, really get my stuff together. And in this next comp, I'm going to go to final. It's just good to understand where you are at. Maybe you can go further, track the scores you've gotten if you're able to get them so that you can kind of measure. I know debaters like to track their speaks and see how well they're doing. Yeah, very important to track your progress. Fourthly, the major itself. Obviously, it's important as prep. Firstly, on the judge test. Secondly, on physical prep. Thirdly, on mental prep. Firstly, on the judge test, and this is so important that it has 2 slides for it. The judge test is the most important part of a major. I am not kidding. You literally must execute this right. The difference between getting a 6 and an 8 in a judge test literally decides how your major's run will go. To put this into perspective, round 8, I got an 8.2 in the judge test, and I chaired every single round. And, I didn't judge a contentious round every single time, but I chaired every single round. And, well, I'm not going to say how well I did, but if you do, you probably know that I think I did pretty well that major. Compare this to ABP. I got a 6.5 and I paneled every single round. I literally was on the edge of not breaking because me getting a panel. You see, the problem is when you get allocated as a panel or as a trainee, you are fighting against the odds because the perception of your skill being allocated as a panelist means that you're often imposed a slightly higher standard. This is obviously chairs are not intentional, but it's just a psychological thing, right? Like you are not going to get easy high top scoring scores in the majority of instances, especially if you're a panelist, especially if you're a trainee. So doing well in the judge test is very important because if you get a low score, more often than not, you might be screwed. If you get a 4 in the judge test, it is really, really, really hard to recover. Because remember, especially if you're doing UADC, if you are giving an OA as a trainee, the whole thing I mentioned just now of going up against the odds of the perception of your allocation, especially the things that teams will do against you, you have to give the OA first. You will have to be the ones who say it first within the deliberation, assuming there's deliberation. So, how do you then improve with the judge test? I have a lot of things to say here. Number one, read the handbook, read the manual like it is the goddamn Bible. CAs are obligated to design the judge test to make it so that the answers can be logically derived from somewhere in the handbook. And note that the MCQ is the easiest part to screw up. Sometimes an question might seem too easy, but then you actually answer the question wrong. Always make sure that you triple check your answers. I would literally quadruple. No, I think I checked more than 4 times every single things. Sometimes questions are trick questions. That is where, of course, I mentioned before, the judge workshop and the consistent OA practice and the wisdom you get from other judges is important. You could ask for help, but I wouldn't encourage this. I really don't know if this is legal. I don't know if it's legal to ask for help. I know it's illegal to cheat. Obviously, don't cheat in your OA. Don't cheat your judge test by copying the answers of someone else because they will figure that out. Or I know caps are smart. I have seen instances where they're able to expose people who've cheated in judge tests. But my point here is treat this MCQ very seriously. It is generally like a final exam. You could call it that. It if you get one question wrong, it really does affect the difference between getting probably a 7 or an 8. And the more questions you get wrong, the more it facilitates in. Sometimes I think most MCQs are about 50% at least. Yeah. Yeah. Um Secondly, and I forgot to write this in the OA. Sorry, I forgot to write this in the workshop. But the reason that going back here, prep competitions, the reason that these prep competitions are important is because there's a segment in the judge test where you put your CV. And the reason for that is because they do need to understand. I think this is a theory I am making. I have never been a major CA, so take this with a grain of salt. Maybe one of the major CAs can comment and disprove me right here. But I think they do take in a part of your resume, in terms of your allocation. I know most of it comes from how well you do, but the resume that you have is probably something that is relevant. So make sure that's why prep comps are important. Okay, so again, as we know, MCQ is easy to screw up. Always make sure you triple check your answers. On the OA, there is a written OA segment, and this is something which is very important because the written OA is obviously a very, very big part of how you're scoring. Firstly, the word limit exists for a reason. CAs aren't looking for judges giving the most elaborate, well written OA. They want you to give a quality OA that is concise. So, things like bullet points, and I will emphasize this a lot, bullet points are king. Bullet points got me from scoring a 7.0 in the UADC 23 to a 8.2 in UADC 2024. That is something which is, like, I would say very important. And like, I swear I'm not trying to brag here by, oh my god, look at my scores. But genuinely speaking, like that is what I would say. That's what did get me to getting that score, and so this is not just me. I'm not just saying this from my own. I'm saying this from other people who did a just test. Every single cap I asked in my preparation would say they just like it when you are short and sweet and concise. So avoid rambling and get straight to the point. Secondly, it's a recording. You're going to judge the recording. So watch the recording multiple times. I would watch my recording at least 3 times. I remember I spent 2 to 3 hours on the judge test, obviously, which is the suggested time that CAPS would say to work on the judge test. But just make sure that you watch the round because you don't want to miss a claim. You want to make sure that you're always improving the accuracy of your OA. Thirdly, when it comes to scoring, there are 2 factors here. Firstly, the handbook is a good guide, but secondly, and people don't really say this, Asians, I guess, if you're watching this and you're judging Asians, both Asians majors, there's like a elusive but societal like circuit norm to serve as a slightly accurate benchmark, where The 80 is probably something which is very rare to give unless it was a generally good round. But also, we're not that strict to think we're at 75. But at the same time, everyone has different scoring norms. This is probably me just like stretch. Just use the handbook. I think that's good enough. Secondly, physical preparation. Number one, get sleep. Somehow, in all three of the majors I participated in, I did not get sleep. I don't know how I survived, but I did, but I still would not recommend it. It was really, really painful to survive because, your sleep, your cognitive functioning determines how well you do as a judge. And this is something that's very obvious advice, so I really hope that you follow it. Secondly, caffeine is your best friend. Drink caffeine before the tournament. When you wake up, make sure you get a nice cup of coffee. Make sure you get food. Eating food is good. They are always going to be offering breakfast and lunch, obviously. So make sure you eat that. It's going to be nice. It's going to make you feel good. I know it's tempting, and this is probably also obvious advice, but don't get drunk during the prelims. Get drunk during breaks. You can get drunk during breaks. That's good vibes. But don't get drunk before the tournament. That's not good vibes. And also, don't get drunk even during out rounds. I don't care. You need to be in good shape also during the out rounds. Thirdly, majors are exhausting. The prelims are gonna get exhausting, especially if it's like, let's say it's day one and it's day one of the or round. It's day two and it's round two. It's gonna get tiring. If it's day two of UADC and it's round five, that's gonna get tiring. Especially if it's round eight of day three, that's gonna be especially tiring. Wash your face in the middle of the day, get some sun, chat with people. Just try to figure out ways to revitalize your energy because it is going to get exhausting. Mental preparation. This is also two slides because I think it's very important. Firstly, go into each and every round thinking that it's just another round. You want to avoid and limit performance anxiety as much as possible, especially when you're judging. And it kind of helps to gaslight yourself into just thinking that, hey, maybe judging really isn't that deep, guys. I would boldly claim that this is actually wise advice because if you don't treat like obviously you need to treat the round seriously. But my point is that if you go into the round thinking this is just a job, I'm just doing is every round is just the round that I'm doing right now. And this feeds into the second advice, which is do not dwell on previous round. Because you want to again avoid any triggers of potential anxieties because overthinking judging will kill your judging. I am someone who really, really is hurt by judging when I overthink. It clouds your judgment, it hurts your ability to come up with a call as fast as possible, or at least come in a call at a time that is reasonable. Thirdly, it's exhausting, it's going to be tiring, it's going to be frustrating, especially when you don't know how well you are doing. Maybe you got allocated into a bid room on the last day, maybe you're still a panel by round 8, maybe the team was making weird faces during your OA. Always remember that as much as these things can be easy to let get into your mind, you need to be aware that you cannot let these things get to you. This is just the game, this is just the way the game works, and you need to be able to develop your mental resilience. How then do you develop your mental resilience? Number one, friends. Talk to your friends between rounds, talk to other judges during the prep time. Hell, just make new friends. It is just scientifically proven that social interaction improves dopamine, which just makes you feel better. So try to make sure that you're always getting social interaction. Secondly, if you feel sad about a specific round, copium max. Tell yourself it's not that deep. Tell yourself this major does not define you. Tell yourself you're allowed to feel sad, but you're not gonna die. Just feel like this is just life, I guess. Like it's just a major. Who gives a crap? And I think that's very important because it helps you really figure out and kind of ground yourself in reality. Finally, try your best to enjoy the rounds. These are going to be very good rounds, very good debaters. They are suffering for your enjoyment. That's a joke. And they're going to make good cases, and you should try and really, really enjoy the rounds. They're also going to be very, very good motions. The caps, obviously, are going to give great motions, and they're going to try their best to make sure that you always have a good debate to judge. So, yeah, finally, and the final part of this workshop, other stuff. Firstly, majors are a once in a lifetime experience. They are the most special parts of your life, guaranteed. Unless you've gone to so many majors before, where it's just another day. But if this is your first time or this is your first few times, it is going to be something which is special for you. Be a tourist, make friends, go all out, have much fun as possible. Sometimes it's not just about how well you do, it's about literally everything else. And well, I don't need to give you a workshop on how to enjoy a major. You can probably figure that out by yourself. Obviously, don't kill yourself in the process, don't get blackout drunk. You don't want to wake up in the middle, you don't want to wake up in a random bench and then you realize that you missed day 3 of a major. Secondly, track rounds that you aren't judging. Perhaps you didn't break or you didn't get allocated to a specific out rounds. Given that major recordings are quite rare these days, like people aren't really recording majors, I hope this is also a cry to people who are participating in UADC. Please record the rounds on your own accord because I really don't think the OCs will record the rounds on their own accord. If they do, great. If they don't, record them yourselves. Finally, majors are not career defining. I know a lot of good judges, a lot of good debaters who still don't have a major break, but they would break at the major if they're there, but they're just not there because of things like accessibility. And the point I'm trying to make here is that you can have a generally great career without breaking at a major. Yeah, it's gonna be heavy in the moment, whether you break or whether you don't break. But I think the final part and the final message I'll leave in this workshop is you're gonna go back home, you're gonna return to daily life, you're going to think of major as a nice part in the chapter of your life, and that's why it's important to cherish and enjoy it. As much as I can tell you advice on how to improve your performance in a major, at the end of the day, it's just a major. It's just debating, and you shouldn't take it so overly seriously. I did make a video on the mental health in debating if you watch that, which by the way, if you haven't, you should watch that. I think it's very cool. I like yapping about that. Cool. So that's all. I didn't make a slide for the conclusion. Of course, as usual, you can ask me questions if you think that if you want to know any more about stuff. You can ask me for if you can message me for anything. I'm very happy to take some time of my day to give you some advice. I really hope this workshop helped you. Again, this is not something that I was paid for doing. I just did it because I thought people would get help from it. Send it to your friends who send it to anyone who's preparing for a major. And again, this doesn't apply to UADC. This doesn't apply to regional majors. Maybe you're from the Philippines and doing PIDC. Maybe you're in Malaysia and you're preparing for MNIDC. Maybe your country is doing a nationals and you need to prepare for that nationals. It will just be helpful in general. In terms of being able to improve yourself. So yeah, that's all for everyone. I hope you really improve. I hope, sorry, that this is something that's good for you. Uh, I'm going to just post this as soon as I can. Right now it's like 3 a.m. I'll probably post this tomorrow. And then, yeah, that's all. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.